Okay. Hi, everyone. I am Liz Melody Welch, and I will be going through my presentation on leveraging Manifold to craft an OER textbook for Spanish language courses. Yeah. So I'm Liz Melody Welch. I work as a learning designer for NYU Arts and Science. Specifically within that role, I support a handful of different departments, and one of my biggest pockets of departments are a bunch of language-based courses, specifically Latin-based languages. I support Spanish, Portuguese, French, German, like all of the main, probably the big ones when you think of Latin-based languages. Those are my big support focuses. Within the context of that role, I support and manage a whole bunch of different types of projects to improve student learning outcomes and experiences. And one of the specific things I'll be focusing on within the context of the Manifold project is projects that really focus on sustainability and scalability. Okay, so this project in a nutshell, some of the faculty from the Spanish department came to us and said they really wanted to transition from a very costly textbook to an OER textbook. This is a pretty big endeavor for any course, but the Spanish department came to us and they wanted this accomplished for Spanish levels 1 through 4. In total, these are courses that take the students from the 2 elementary levels to the 2 intermediate levels, and probably, somewhere between 800 and 1,000 students a semester is what we're looking at within the context of this textbook. So significant student savings for sure when they approached us with this, but they had a couple of very specific focuses that they wanted to ensure were kept with the construction of this new textbook. They wanted to bring content creation into the department. As everybody knows, when you adopt a textbook, you're not necessarily going to love everything in it, and they really wanted everything within the textbook to be content that they really appreciated. And specifically, they really wanted a stronger focus on culture within the context of this textbook, with the understanding that learners who want to learn something about Spanish can, pull up Duolingo, they can go on YouTube, they can learn a lot of like the basic syntax, grammar stuff about language, but they really wanted to embed culture throughout the context of their textbook. The next priority was they wanted the textbook to be interactive. This is because many digital textbooks today have just so many different layers of media and interactivity baked into them that the faculty were very committed to making sure that whatever textbook we created had a similar level of interactivity. So students could listen to the pronunciation of words. So students could check their own knowledge with different types of questions baked into the book itself, rather than something that's a little more flat. We have other departments in arts and science who have similarly taken on OER textbook projects, and a lot of their products, not to minimize them, but they're very PDF based and very flat subsequently, without a lot of media to accompany them. But the folks at the Spanish department really wanted to focus on that level of interactivity to really elevate student experiences as they were navigating their way through the new book. In addition to the textbook, they wanted to create a workbook companion, right? So a set of auto-graded low-stakes exercises to provide students with a whole bunch of opportunities to practice. Okay. These are probably the two big components. We wanted it to be interactive and we wanted to create a workbook companion to it. So pretty heavy lift in terms of the scale of this project. So known challenges when we dove into reflecting on how to make this happen as we were trying to decide on a platform. So we've got WordPress and specifically Pressbooks, Manifold versus Google Sites. We went through the sort of pros and cons and ultimately decided to land with Manifold, specifically because our institution has a bunch of instances of Manifold and a bunch of both instructor created and student created projects. And it looked like it did a lot of fun things as we started developing and working with actual content creation. We also wanted to acknowledge the technology curve. Our content experts don't have expertise in web creation, right? These are all Spanish language experts, and we really didn't want them to have to focus on needing to learn HTML or CSS or anything like that. And that was also a big reason why we decided to go with Manifold. It's a little more user-friendly, but not quite as limited as Google Sites. And we also had a large content development team. So we had 7+ Spanish language instructors, and that's a lot of cooks in the kitchen, which is great for content creation, but maybe not so much when it comes to project management and keeping everybody on the same page. So what we did through a whole bunch of like bumps and bruises and figuring things out, right? We had this workflow constructed where we use a combination of Google Docs, H5P activities, and Brightspace quizzes. So Google Docs really allowed the 7 different Spanish language experts draft and refine chapter and section content, including what they would like the check-in activities to be, including any media they would like to include, like audio files, video files, etc. And they could structure the Google Docs so that it matched whatever the visual aesthetic they would like each of the sections to look like within the Google Doc itself. To coincide with that, we have H5P activities. So any of the check-in activities that faculty created in the Google Docs were created in H5P. We've got multiple choice questions, true, false, fill in the blank, hotspots, a whole bunch of different types of activities for students to really engage and help make the textbook interactive. And then we decided to use Brightspace quizzes for the workbook, those low-stake exercises. So students get a quiz or a workbook companion at the end of every chapter so they can really practice with those concepts, vocabulary, terminology, etc., within each chapter. And then with each of these, we were sure that with all of the Google Docs, these are all freely available. The Google Docs are embedded with alt text links to everything that needs alt text. These are linked in the Manifold website as well. So if students actually want to look at the textbook in its Google Doc version, they can. Same with instructors. All of the H5P activities are readily shareable. So any instructor who accesses them can replicate them and use them in that way in the true nature of OER. And with Brightspace quizzes, we've also constructed them. So we have an open Google folder that contains a whole bunch of Brightspace common cartridges. So folks who want to adopt the textbook in addition to the workbook companion can do so. All of these things culminate into the Manifold website. For anybody who's not aware of how Manifold works, Google Docs the term is ingested in Manifold, which are basically just uploaded to Manifold. Those come in as HTML pages. Once the HTML pages are brought in, you go through, or I go through, and find the spots where the check-in activities are and replace those check-in activities with the iframes of the H5P activities. As well as any, like if there's a YouTube video in there, I go in and I grab the iframe and just replace that content there. Okay. There were a couple of bumps and bruises along the way as we sort of navigated what this workflow needed to look like. The first one is Manifold is ultra sensitive to document markdown, right? Even if text looked right in the doc, it wouldn't in Manifold. So for example, I would have instructors say, why does it look like this in the Google Doc, but it looks like this in Manifold? And I would go and look, and while the text looked like it was plain text, it had unintentionally been set to like header 2 or something like that. So regardless of how the materials were looking in the doc, Manifold would read it as a specific markdown and change the formatting in that way. So to address this, I worked on a template that folks are now using to help minimize the unintentional use of any markdowns throughout the text. Manifold tends to default to left-aligned images. We're not sure exactly why Manifold does this one. We've been in touch with the developers about it. But yeah, most images, if they're centered, sometimes Manifold's like, actually, I want this to be left-aligned. It's not tragic, but it is a little bit annoying. But we do know that the Manifold developers are working on that. They just don't have a timeline in terms of when that might be addressed yet. Additionally, cropped images do not ingest correctly. When I say ingest images here, if you add an image to a Google Doc and then use Google Doc's own internal cropping tool, Manifold doesn't know how to handle that, and it just takes the entirety of the image. So this is another like little bump and bruise where we said, okay, we have to bring in images just as they are, rather than bringing them in and then cropping them in Google Docs, because Manifold does not know how to play with that. As well as just some added spacing. So in some instances, there's some extra spacing around embedded content like the H5P activities. Each of these is really more of aesthetic bumps, right? Nothing that functionally has prevented us from doing what we need to do with this textbook, which we really appreciate. And we are steadily working on, specifically with the markdown and the added spacing, we're working on getting those bumps and bruises out so that the end product is exactly what the instructors want and looks the way they want it to for students to engage with their text. Okay, future opportunities for Manifold that we're also really excited about. This project is still underway, but what compelled us the most to choose Manifold over some of the other options were the option to embed resources throughout the text. And I have a screenshot from another project that in this piece of text, this little square indicates a resource that actually links students while they're reading to an additional article, piece of media, piece of audio, etc., which we think has a lot of potential for language learning if we want to link students out to, a conversation going on between two individuals speaking in Spanish so that they can read about the concepts, watch a video, right, and have this really sort of holistic learning experience. Manifold also has a social annotation function where you can create reading groups. So we can actually have individual like sections of Spanish 1 go in and annotate a particular chapter, right? So they can go in and engage with each other and talk about the concepts, the cultural ideas that are being reflected within that individual class. And we really like that potential as well, with the social annotation, that there's either a global setting where it can be open to everybody under the sun to make comments, or you can set it to a class by class level using the reading groups function. So we're really excited about this as we continue to really develop and refine the project. Okay, and that's all I have. Does anybody have any questions? Okay.
I'll say folks can unmute as well. You don't have to put it in the chat if that's easier. So Claire is asking if we can see some samples. I don't know if you have that available to you.
I do not yet. It is still in progress and I'm waiting for the green light from the faculty. But I appreciate you asking. It's a popular project and we're excited for it to be finished. I can share this link if you want to see what the Manifold projects end up looking like. So you can see what the table of contents will look like. NYU has a couple of open texts you can take a look at to see exactly what Manifold products can look like at the end.
Claire was also asking, I'm not sure if you saw that, what is the name of the textbook series?
The instructors haven't decided yet. There's 7 of them, so they have contenders, but they haven't picked yet.
I'm reading them for the recording. So in terms of accessibility, what are some features Manifold has?
So Manifold's interface, and I can actually just go to one of the texts and show you. Let me go to one of the open projects. This is the big one that I tend to show folks. So let me share. So let me just pop into one of the pages here. Okay, so the reader in Manifold lets anyone customize exactly how they see things, right? So these are the annotations. We can change the font sizes, indicate whether it's serif or sans serif, choose the color scheme, right? So I can toggle it back and forth here. Sans serif, you can change the margin settings, right? So this is probably the big one. This was possibly one of the biggest aesthetic hurdles with my faculty, is I had to remind them that they did not have to pick the font. Manifold kind of chooses for you, right? There's a set sans serif and there's a set serif that you can pick. You can up the size of the text, the media linked over here. This is one of those resources I was referring to, where it just kind of links in. And then these are the annotation groups that I was referring to before. Any of the content that's embedded, though, you have to do your due diligence to make sure it's accessible with, captions and things like that. It doesn't have anything innate in that way. So I have my folks go through and generate captions and proofread them. No problem, Irene. Yeah, we're excited to roll this out. We're hoping to roll out Spanish 1 and 2 for a pilot of students in the spring.
I might have missed this when you were speaking. When did you start the project?
So we started brainstorming the project last February 2024 when we started outlining and gathering the team and everything. We didn't start building until this February, so
Okay.
February 25.
So like a year of planning and then
Mm-hmm.
months now of collaboration. Excellent, thank you.
No problem.
Claire just mentioned, as a former Spanish professor, this is much needed. The textbooks are so expensive.
Yeah. Yeah, Claire, I think my faculty would also agree. And they also just really wanted a lot more control over the content because they just found themselves skipping entire sections and chapters and then replacing it with their own content and then saying, why are we asking students to pay for this if we're only using a fraction of it?
Perla is asking, will you have a site where you will report how the pilot course went? Looking forward to it.
We should. Yeah, absolutely. No problem.
Liz, can you put in the chat your contact information? I'm sure you're going to get some requests for that information to see the pilot course for sure.
Okay, that's me. Yeah, we're just going through some student testing now, having some more advanced students in the Spanish language. So those who have already completed 1 and 2, so they're in 3 or 4, they're taking a look at the text now and sort of giving their feedback on what they think works, what they think doesn't, and things like that.
Any other questions? Maybe next year you can update us at the OER conference, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Uh,
Definitely be able to show it off more in its glory.
Right. You might need a longer session next year. All right. If there are no more questions, thank you so much for joining us today, Liz. We
Of course.
appreciate your time and hope to see you next year.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for joining the session.